It tastes like an apple and a spoonful of honey mixed together. It grows wild without a bit of care, and almost nobody plants it anymore, and today I am going to tell you why. A single acre of Pennsylvania Dutch ground in 1897 fed Jacob Herzler's whole family through the coldest winter of the decade without 1 pound of store-bought sugar crossing his threshold. Jacob pulled a perennial root out of the garden in October that tasted exactly like an apple and a spoonful of honey, and he used it to sweeten his family's porridge and his grandchildren's mouths straight through to the spring thaw. He grew a full row of it behind the henhouse in ground he never once fertilized, and it came back on its own the next year off the roots he left behind. Today, most Americans have never heard the name of that plant because the seed racks do not carry it, the extension does not teach it, and the nurseries do not stock it. But here is the twist. The plant did not quit growing, and it did not stop tasting like apple and honey. The United States Department of Agriculture still keeps its seed in a vault in Colorado, and a handful of old gardeners still have it in the ground behind their houses. It just left the shelf one year, and nobody came looking for it. My name is Amos. I am 66 years old, and I am the 5th generation on this ridge, the last one my grandmother taught before the knowing could die with her. So if you mean to hold the old ways alongside me, consider subscribing. It's free, and you can always change your mind later. None of these faded because they quit working, friend. They faded because somebody figured out how to sell you what your grandfather grew for free, and I want to count them down for you from 25 all the way to the one on the thumbnail. Number 25. Your great-grandmother had a plant called Good King Henry growing in the shady corner where nothing else would grow, and it fed her family greens from March through October every year without a single replanting. You cook it exactly like spinach, and the same crown comes back every spring on its own, so the seed cost her nothing after the first packet. Now the store charges you $4 for a plastic bag of pre-washed spinach that lasts 3 days. Good King Henry left the seed racks around 1955, when the catalog companies pruned the perennials in favor of annuals you had to buy again every year. Cornell's extension still lists it. 1 packet, 1 shady corner, greens for life. Number 24. Reed's Yellow Dent and Bloody Butcher fed the American South and Midwest for 150 years, an open-pollinated corn that ground into meal, fattened a hog, fed a flock, and dropped seed for next year off the same ear. Your grandfather saved a bushel of the best cobs off the field every fall and never bought corn seed once his whole life. Then in 1930, a man named Henry Wallace commercialized hybrid corn seed through Pioneer Hybrid, and by 1960 almost nobody in this country grew a corn that would come true from its own kernel. The Federal Germplasm Bank still keeps Reed's, and Southern Exposure still sells it. Grind it for cornbread, feed it to the flock, and save the ear for a lifetime of seed. Number 23. The whippoorwill pea, the Crowder pea, the black-eyed pea. The cowpea fed the American South through summers so hot nothing else would set fruit, and it left the ground richer than it found it, because a cowpea pulls nitrogen out of the air and fixes it in the soil through its roots. Your great-grandfather rotated a bean row into a corn row and cut his fertilizer bill to nothing. The store now charges you $30 for a 50-pound bag of fertilizer that does what the pea did for free. Cowpeas came off the catalog racks in the 1960s when the feed companies convinced farmers a bag of chemistry was easier than a rotation. Clemson still tests the old varieties. A packet feeds you and feeds the ground, and never a bill for either. Number 22. Turkey red wheat was brought to Kansas in 1874 by Mennonite immigrants in the pockets of their coats, and it fed the American breadbasket for 80 years off seed that came true every fall. A family grew a quarter acre and ate bread all winter. Then in 1970, the Plant Variety Protection Act let seed companies patent grain, and by the late 1970s, a farmer who saved his own wheat seed could get sued for it, and Turkey red almost vanished. The Kansas Wheat Commission and millers like Heartland Mill brought it back in the 2000s. It grinds into a bread flour the store now charges you $9 a loaf for, while a pound of saved seed plants a row and gives you flour and next year's seed both. Number 21. Every farmhouse my grandfather's generation grew up in had a cistern under the porch or a barrel at the downspout, and the family drank, cooked, washed, and watered the garden off the rain the sky sent free. The Federal Soil Conservation Program taught cistern construction into the 1940s. Then the rural water utilities reached out through the 1950s and 1960s, and the meter took over, and now the store charges you $1.50 for a bottle of what falls on your roof. Texas A&M Extension still publishes the plans. A 500-gallon barrel off a shed roof waters a whole garden through July, and the one part you never skip is a first flush diverter and a screened lid. Number 20. A single Nubian doe on a quarter-acre gives a family a gallon of milk a day for 10 months of the year off pasture, browse, and the scraps from your kitchen, and she kids every spring, so there is more milk and meat if you want it. The store now charges you $5 for a gallon of milk from a cow you never met. The grocery chains crowded the family dairy off the map through the 1950s and 1960s, and the backyard goat became a hobby instead of a source. The Livestock Conservancy still tracks the old breeds. A milk goat ties you down twice a day with no days off, but she will kill your dairy bill and hand you a kid every spring. Here is where it stops being quaint, friend, and starts being the reason the seed catalogs got so thin. Number 19. Your great-grandmother rendered a year's cooking fat off one hog every November and never bought a can of shortening because a hog gives 30 to 40 pounds of leaf lard and back fat, and lard rendered clean in a low oven keeps a year in a cool cellar. Then in 1911, Crisco marketed a hydrogenated cottonseed shortening as cleaner than lard, and by the 1950s a whole generation had never seen fat come off an animal. The store now charges you $6 for a can of oil that has never been near a hog, and the Department of Agriculture nutrition data has since reversed itself, so lard is not the villain anymore. A hog fed on scraps costs you nothing you are not already throwing away. Number 18. Before the cane sugar refiners took over the American table in the late 1800s, half the South and the whole Appalachian Range grew sweet sorghum, a cane you crushed with a horse-driven mill and boiled down into a dark syrup that sweetened biscuits, oatmeal, and coffee for a year, 100 gallons off a single acre. Your great-grandfather's syrup mill was the fall social event of the county. Then the big sugar outfits of the early 1900s put the syrup mill out of business, and by 1970 you could not find a working one within 100 miles. Muddy Pond sorghum in Tennessee still runs. A packet of seed grows a bed, you can crush it by hand, and sorghum on your grits is free forever. Number 17. Muscadines grew wild across the American South before any European vine ever crossed the ocean, and every farm ran an arbor of them along the smokehouse wall. Grapes for eating, grapes for jelly, grapes for wine, on vines that lived 100 years without spray, without pruning, and without a nurseryman. Then the wine industry standardized on the European grape, and the muscadine got reclassified as ornamental or wild and dropped off the catalogs. The University of Georgia never stopped breeding them. A muscadine vine set once produces for 4 generations, while the store charges you $5 for a pint shipped from Chile. One vine, 40 pounds of fruit a year, no spray, and never a bill after the first cutting took root. Number 16. Salsify. The oyster plant grew in kitchen gardens across America into the 1950s, a long taproot that tasted like a mild oyster when you fried it in butter, feeding a family through winter out of a cellar bin. Around 1954, the federal government effectively dropped it from its commercial vegetable listings. The grocery chains would not stock it, and it never came back on the seed racks. Baker Creek still sells it. The store now charges you $9 for a pint of oysters from a coast you do not live near, so grow the root instead. One honest note, though, the wild parsnip in the ditches looks similar, and its sap will burn you, so grow salsify in a bed where you know exactly what it is. Number 15. The sunchoke fed indigenous farmers across the eastern woodlands centuries before your family got here, and it fed the Depression through, a tuber that comes back every year off whatever you leave in the ground, in soil so poor nothing else will grow. One planting, tubers forever. Then Earl Butz told American farmers in 1971 to plant fence row to fence row in corn and soybeans, and the perennial tuber became a weed. Cornell Small Farms still trials sunchokes. The store now charges you $7 a pound for the tuber in the specialty aisle, so grow a bed at the back of the yard nothing else wants, and roast them, fry them, or feed them to the pigs. My grandfather called them poor ground potatoes, and the ground grows them on its own. Number 14. Here is the one I told you almost nobody has got left, the Java hen and the Buckeye, dual-purpose American breeds bred in the 1800s to forage their own feed off a yard, lay 200 eggs a year, and dress out big enough for the Sunday table. Then in 1948, the Chicken of Tomorrow contest picked a Cornish cross bird that grew twice as fast on a bag of feed, and the whole heritage flock got walked to the back of the barn. The Livestock Conservancy over in Pittsburgh lists the Java as critically endangered, with a few hundred breeding birds left in the whole country. Your grandmother's hen worked for her feed, and the industrial bird cannot. Number 13. Now here's the piece nobody tells you about a laying flock. 8 hens on a quarter acre give your family a dozen eggs a day in season if you manage them the old way, a coop shut tight at dusk and a run rotated across grass, and Penn State Extension trials show a heritage bird will forage 60 to 70% of her own feed. The store charges you $4.50 a dozen. The first laying flock I ever put in by myself, I forgot to shut the door one night in April, and a fox took half my pullets before sunrise. My grandfather did not say a word. He just handed me the hinges and a new hasp and asked me if I had learned it now. You will lose birds, friend. Everybody does. Number 12. A single beehive gives a family 50 pounds of honey a year, and my grandfather's people kept 3 colonies in log gums behind the smokehouse from 1890 on. The big grocery chains started stocking cheap imported honey in the 1930s, and by the 1970s nobody kept a home hive, so the store now charges you $8 a pound for honey that traveled 6,000 miles. A top bar hive you build yourself off scrap lumber runs a family in sweetener for the year and pollinates every fruit tree in the yard. The Federal Agriculture Department still lists beekeeping among its most recommended backyard operations. Set 1 hive this spring and check your county for hive registration. The bees feed themselves and you just keep the box. Number 11. Everybody thinks maple, but nobody remembers that box elder, black walnut, and river birch all give a sap you can boil down into syrup, and every one of them grows wild across the Appalachian and Midwest ranges on land you do not even own. The native and settler families up in Vermont tapped birch as often as maple, and then the syrup industry standardized on the sugar maple, and the other 3 dropped off the map. Cornell and the University of Vermont maple programs both publish on the alternate trees. Now the store charges you $18 a quart for maple, while a single black walnut tapped in February gives you 2 gallons of sap a day for 2 weeks. Boil it down 40 to 1 for free sugar off a tree you did not plant. Number 10. The pawpaw is the largest native fruit in North America, a tree that grows wild from Kansas to the Atlantic, and its fruit tastes like a mango, and a banana had a cousin who grew up in Ohio. Your great-grandfather ate them by the bagful every September. The commercial fruit industry could not ship them because they bruise inside a day, so they never made the grocery aisle and a generation forgot the tree existed. Kentucky State University runs the country's only full pawpaw breeding program. The store sells you an imported mango for $3 a piece, while a pawpaw tree in your yard gives you 50 pounds of fruit a year for 40 years. Eat only the flesh, never the skin or the seeds. Number 9. Every farm my grandfather visited had a root cellar dug into the north slope, a stone-walled room 40 degrees year-round with no electricity that kept potatoes, cabbage, carrots, parsnips, apples, and squash from October until April with no bill and no compressor. Then in 1947 rural electrification finished, and by the 1960s the freezer replaced the cellar, and now you run a chest freezer full of food that spoils the day the power drops. Roddale still publishes the plans. Dig into a bank and ventilate it, and the one part you never skip is the airflow, because a sealed cellar rots the crop. A cellar keeps your winter with no electric bill at all. Number 8. Before the pressure canners took over American kitchens in the 1950s, your great-grandmother put up a year of cabbage, cucumbers, and beans in stoneware crocks with nothing but salt and water, plain lacto fermentation. The store charges you $9 a jar for artisan sauerkraut. The home economics classes taught fermentation into the 1960s, and then those classes got cut from the public schools between 1968 and 1978, and a generation lost it. Cornell and the Agriculture Department both publish safe fermentation guides now. Cabbage, salt, crock, wait 3 weeks in the cellar, and that is the whole method. Only the brine has to cover the vegetable or mold gets in. Every jar the store sells you, you can put up yourself for pennies. Number 7. They did not outlaw this one, they engineered it out. The hybrid seed on the rack will not come true from its own saved seed, so you buy it again every spring forever, but an open pollinated bean saves itself off a single packet. Dry the pod, shell it, keep it in a jar in the cellar, and plant it next April, and the same holds for tomatoes, peppers, lettuce, corn, and squash. Seed Savers Exchange in Iowa keeps the varieties alive. The seed rack at the big box store sells you seed that was designed to make you buy again next year. 1 packet of Cherokee Trail of Tears bean, saved out every fall, feeds a family for a lifetime and never cost you $1 again. My grandfather wrote that one down in 1961, and he never bought a bean seed twice. Number 6. Here we go, the one the United States Congress got involved in. In 1970, the Plant Variety Protection Act let seed companies patent varieties, and by the late 1970s, a farmer saving certain seeds could get sued. But the heritage beans, the Cherokee Trail of Tears, the rattlesnake, the turkey craw, the Mostoller wild goose, they slipped through because they belong to families, not corporations. Your great-grandmother grew a 50-foot row and put up 30 pounds of dry beans in a jar, while the store charges you $3 a pound for the same bean. Southern Exposure Seed Exchange and Seed Savers still list every one. One packet plants a row, one row feeds a family a winter of soup, and the saved seed at the end plants next year. They tried to make you rent your food, friend, and the bean said no. Number 5 rebuilds the ground under your feet. Comfrey, a plant your great-grandfather grew in the corner of the yard, sends roots 10 feet deep, pulling minerals up out of the subsoil into leaves you cut 3 times a season and lay down as mulch. Between the comfrey and a flock scratching over the beds, my grandfather's garden never took a bag of fertilizer in 80 years. Ammonium nitrate was a wartime explosive redirected to farm sales starting in 1947, and by 1960 the American farmer was hooked on a $30 bag for what a comfrey patch did free. The Rodale Institute has documented it since the 1940s. One comfrey crown plants a corner, and you never fertilize by check again. Number 4, your great-grandmother's herb bed had thyme, sage, rosemary, oregano, mint, chamomile, and lemon balm growing along the kitchen door, and she cooked out of it every night for 40 years. The grocery aisle now charges you $3 for a plastic clamshell of 6 leaves of basil that last 3 days. Grow the bed, dry the leaves, and fill a jar. I will say it plain, this is not medicine, it is flavor and kitchen dignity, and it is a bill the store wants you paying that you do not need to. Cornell Extension still teaches it. A packet of seed, a sunny corner, and herbs for a decade. Number 3. A 100-foot row of Kennebec potatoes gives a family 200 pounds of potatoes for the winter. Off-seed potatoes you save from this year's harvest, and my grandfather's cellar stored 6 bushels every November. The Maine Potato Lady and Fedco still sell the old varieties. The store now charges you $4 for a 5-pound bag, while $20 of seed potato in the spring gives you the whole winter starch. Grow the row, save the best tubers, and plant again. And now the crown of this list, the one on the thumbnail. Number 2. Skirret. Say it with me, skirret. A perennial root your great-great-grandmother grew from Pennsylvania to the Carolinas, and when you pull it out of the ground in October and eat it raw, it tastes like an apple and a spoonful of honey mixed together. No exaggeration, that is the flavor. Its Latin name is Cium cicerum. The Pennsylvania Dutch grew rows of it, and it stayed in Fearing-Burr's catalog until around 1902, when it got dropped for the very reason it is a treasure. It is perennial. You plant it once and dig divisions off the same crown for the rest of your life, and there was no money in a root you only ever bought seed for one time. The Federal National Plant Germplasm System still keeps the seed, and Baker Creek carries it again. It grows wild without care in ordinary soil, no fertilizer, no spray, no fuss, and it sweetens porridge, tea, and a child's mouth standing next to you at the row. One planting, seed forever, never a bill. And number 1 is not a plant, friend. It is not an animal. And it is not a skill. Number 1 is every plant, every animal, and every skill above it, standing in one yard at the same time, feeding one family. The self-fed homestead. The row of skirret by the kitchen door, and the sorghum out back, the 8 hens in a coop that shuts at dusk, and the goat on the lot line, the comfrey crown pulling minerals up, and the bean row saving itself, the cellar under the porch, and the crock of kraut on the shelf. That is what your great-grandfather was. He was not poor, friend. He was fed, free, and beholden to no store. And Jacob Herzler, on that 1897 Lancaster County farm, lived to be 89 off ground that never once needed a sugar bowl from a store. Now hear me. I am not selling you fear, and I am not selling you doom, and I am not telling you a window box feeds a family. Some of this the law in your county looks at sideways, the raw milk, the home butchery, the roof-caught water for drinking, and I told you where those lines run. So here is what I need from you. Pick one, just one. Set a packet of Cherokee Trail of Tears bean this spring, or put 3 hens on your kitchen scraps, or start a comfrey patch in the corner where nothing else grows, or, if the title pulled you here, plant 1 bed of skirret and taste apple and honey out of your own ground next October. Tell me down below what your people kept that nobody keeps anymore, because the one that gets the most comments is the one I build next. Your granddad grew every one of these, and somebody just did not get the chance to pass it down to you. Now it is yours again, and now you are one of